I'm here today in the South Bay to check out filming locations for Jackie Brown. Now, 95% of the movie was filmed right here in the South Bay, which makes things a bit easier for me, but there's still a lot of locations to track down. So because of that, let's skip the big intro and just get started. Let's go see what we can find. The movie starts with a montage during the credits of Jackie walking through different parts of the airport, and that all takes place right here at LAX. But unfortunately, all those sections of the airport that she's walking through are only accessible to employees and ticket holders. Now, as far as I know, that tile wall that we see her walking by, that's still there and still looks the same. However, those other locations have been remodeled and don't quite look like they did in the movie. So if you ever find yourself arriving or departing from LAX and you want to check out those locations, this is where they were filmed. After the opening credits, we see Ordell and Lewis sitting in Melanie's apartment watching Chicks Who Love Guns. Now, Melanie's beachside apartment was actually filmed in two separate locations right across the street from each other. All the interiors of Melanie's apartment were filmed inside this building. And as you can see, it sits right in front of the beach. There's that ocean view that we can see out the window. And a little bit later in the video, I'm going to show you where the exteriors of her apartment were filmed. After Ordell finds out that Beaumont's been arrested, he pays a visit to Cherry Bail Bonds, which would have been located right here, but unfortunately it's been torn down. But when Ordell and Lewis are getting out of the car, the camera is looking through the window of Cherry Bail Bonds, and across the street you can see the Carson Civic Center, which looks almost exactly like it did at the time of filming. After Ordell gives the keys to Lewis and tells him to go wait in the car, we see Lewis come walking out of the building, and right next door we see that taco restaurant, which is also no longer here. And as Lewis approaches the car, you can also see a mobile gas station over here on this corner. That's also gone. Pretty much the only things that are still here at this intersection are the Carson Civic Center and this Carl's Jr. over here on this corner. After Max gets Beaumont out of jail, Ordell comes to Beaumont's apartment to pay him a visit. He comes walking down the hallway before giving him a hug, and that happens right here in front of his apartment. This one right here to my right, number 16. Ordell and Beaumont stand right here having that conversation where he convinces him to come with him to help him work out a deal with some Koreans. We see Beaumont locking up his apartment, and then they come walking down these stairs. The camera is shooting from the other side of the pool, filming them walking past all of these apartments. And as you can see, not much has changed here. They move past this staircase and then stand in the front entrance for a minute having a conversation. And if you look out the front door, you can see Ordell's car parked right across the street. It was parked pretty much right where this car is parked, right where that utility pole is, but none of these houses would have been here at that time. This all would have been an empty field. After he convinces Beaumont to get in the trunk, we see Ordell pull away from the curb. He makes a U-turn and then drives off down the street that way. Ordell goes down to the end of the block, makes a left and then another left. He ends up in that empty field, and that's where he ends up killing Beaumont. Now, there was one building that's still here that was there at that time. If you look in that scene, up in the corner, you can see a tall, skinny steeple of a church. And if we drive down here to the end of the block, there's that church steeple. And then right across from the church, down here is basically where Ordell would have turned into the field. Now, when Jackie first gets approached by the two cops in what we assume is the parking structure of the airport, that was actually filmed on the second floor of this parking structure at the Del Amo Mall. But unfortunately, the second floor is now completely gated off and off limits to the public for some reason. If we look up here, you can kind of see right there next to the elevator, that's where she would have been walking when the two cops come up along either side of her. And even if we come to the same section but on the first floor, you can see that everything somewhat looks the same. It's just not as cool because it's the first floor, but you can see that everything kind of matches up. First of all, this elevator sign right here is exactly the same as the one that we see in the movie, and even the style of bricks on the wall is the same. Notice this little hump up here with the exit sign right below it. And the layout's the same too. The elevator to the left, and then the stairs over here to the right. These stairs are gated off. Like I said, everything going up to the second floor is gated off. Also take note of all of this over here. It doesn't completely match up with what we see in the movie, but again, that's because we're on the first floor. Even the lights still match up with the ones that we see in the movie. They just no longer have those cages over them. Now, not just that scene was filmed here, but all of the parking garage scenes were filmed here on the second floor of this parking structure. And again, this is at the Del Amo Mall in the parking garage that's right behind where the Dave & Buster's now is. After Jackie gets arrested, she has her court hearing in front of a very special guest judge, and that happens right here at the Torrance Courthouse. Now, I wasn't able to film inside the courthouse, but if you can see through those windows, which you probably can't, but those are the halls after Ordell walks out of the courtroom. We see him walking down the hall. Notice that stone wall just outside of the window. And speaking of the judge, later in the movie when Jackie goes to Melanie's apartment, notice the name that's just above Melanie's on the directory. After Ordell leaves the courthouse, he pays another visit to Max Cherry, this time to get Jackie out of jail.
I didn't hear you wash your hands.
This is the old woman's jail, now used as a warehouse, but still owned by the sheriff's department. And this was the location used as the jail where Max picks up Jackie. Max approaches the guard booth and lets them know that he's here to drop off one prisoner and pick up another. After turning in his gun, we see Max walking into the prison to drop off the prisoner. Max is then sitting right here in this very spot, reading a book and waiting for Jackie to come out. Max stands right here in front of the gate, watching Jackie walk out of the jail. Jackie comes out of this gate, walks past the guard booth, and Max is waiting for her right here. He offers to give her a ride home, and they walk off this way towards his car. When Max is giving Jackie a ride home from jail, he suggests that they stop and get a drink, and she suggests that they stop at the Cockatoo Inn, which used to be located right here, and I'm pretty sure it used to take up this entire area. Supposedly, some of these hotels are still the original Cockatoo Inn buildings, but some of the other sections of the Cockatoo Inn were completely torn down. At one time, the Cockatoo Inn was an extremely famous hotel. It was owned by a supposed member of the mafia, so it used to be a mafia hangout. It was a hangout for Hollywood celebrities, and it was supposedly one of the places where JFK and Marilyn Monroe would meet up. By the time that they filmed Jackie Brown, the Cockatoo Inn was already closed down, gated off, and condemned, but Quentin Tarantino was extremely persistent that they film those scenes at the actual Cockatoo Inn. According to one story, the only way they were actually able to film here was they promised the mayor of Hawthorne that he could meet Robert De Niro, and then he allowed them to shoot at the Cockatoo Inn. Now, they filmed quite a few scenes here, and we'll be back here in just a bit. After having a drink at the Cockatoo Inn, Max drops off Jackie at her apartment. Ordell would have been sitting in his car right about where I'm sitting right now, watching them. After he sees Max leave, he grabs his gun off the passenger seat and heads in to pay Jackie a visit. As he's walking up to the apartment, you can see all these houses across the street. So am I the only one that gets sad during that scene when Max is buying the Delphonics tape from Sam Goody? Just seeing all those old signs makes me feel so nostalgic. Ordell comes to meet Jackie, and he parks his car right here across the street from Crystal Palace Billiards, which is now the parking lot of a McDonald's. But his car would have been parked right here in front of me, and in the movie you can actually see these houses across the street, along with this sign and a bit of this building. Ordell got out of his car and then walked into the section of the Cockatoo Inn that used to be located right here. But unfortunately that building has since been torn down, and this is all that's left of it. Right here where this dirt field now is, this is where Jackie and Ordell would have sat and talked. After witnessing the fake switch, Max follows Simone out here to the parking lot, who would have been parked somewhere right over here. He then watches her get in her car and drive off right towards that white building in front of me. It's a very recognizable building, and of course that giant anchor in front helps out a bit. Max drives right by this shopping center on my left side, and if you look at Google Maps, most of the businesses still look the same that they did at the time of filming. However, I think today the only business that's still the same is the Scarlet Lady Saloon. So I already showed you where the interiors of the apartment were filmed, and then right across the street, that's the building where the exteriors were filmed. Notice those railings right there on the outside of the windows. You can see railings like that when Ordell and Jackie are standing out on the balcony. Now we only see the exteriors of this building very briefly when Jackie's leaving the apartment and Jackie and Ordell are walking down the stairs and then through the hallway. So I wasn't able to get inside this building. It was locked up pretty tight. But you can see right here, this is the hallway that they were walking down. And this building over here, this one can be seen directly behind them. And when Jackie's on her way to the Del Amo Mall to make the final exchange, we see her traveling down Sepulveda Boulevard right here. And right over there where that Wendy's now is, used to be a different restaurant, and I remember it well. Unfortunately, it's since been torn down and the Wendy's is now there in its place. However, right across the street, this other building that says JB Wholesale, that was there at the time and can be seen in the movie. She moves down Sepulveda Boulevard and right past this shopping center. She then passes by this motel, which at the time was a travel lodge, and I also definitely remember that being there as well. And she then continues down Sepulveda towards Crenshaw. Fun fact, the car that Jackie's driving is the same car that Bruce Willis's character drives in the movie Pulp Fiction. Now the funny thing is that last scene is actually geographically correct, meaning Jackie is headed towards the Del Amo Mall. She's just a couple minutes away from it, but then in this scene, she's now on Hawthorne Boulevard. She's past the mall, headed back in the opposite direction, passing right by this shopping center on my left side. We first see her pass by this building, which at the time was Kids R Us. She then moves past this building, which at the time was a business called Bookstar. It's now Trader Joe's. And as she moves a bit further past Bookstar, we see her pass by Office Depot, and this building right here was still Office Depot up until just recently. She's now magically at the Del Amo Fashion Center, driving right here on Carson Street, passing through this parking structure. We get a very brief shot of Max driving through this intersection at Hawthorne Boulevard and Fashion Way. Where this Mitsuwa Market now is, this used to be a Marshall's, and it was the location of the blue tile wall that we see Jackie walking in front of when she's headed into the Del Amo Fashion Center. Down this path used to be the entrance of the mall that we see Jackie walk through, but that section of the mall no longer exists. This is what we would have seen behind Jackie as she's walking into the mall. And over here where this outdoor shopping section now is, this would have been the area of the mall that we see Jackie walk into, where we see the Sam Goody behind her. But as you can see, there's no longer a Sam Goody, unfortunately. Jackie moves through the mall away from the food court, rounds the corner and into Billingsley Department Store. In the background behind Jackie, you can see the old food court, which plays a major role in the movie, but unfortunately they tore it out years ago and built a new food court in another section of the mall. But right back here, this is where the old food court would have been. Coincidentally, Michael Bowen, who plays Detective Mark Dargis in Jackie Brown, also starred in the movie Valley Girl, which also heavily featured this food court. I wonder if he had flashbacks while filming Jackie Brown. Earlier in the movie, we see Ordell hiding out by this store, spying on Jackie and Max, who were sitting in the food court. Right here you can see this is the view that Ordell would have had. Right here in front of me, this would have been the food court. Inside Macy's, you can find the fitting rooms where they do the money switch, although the actual inside of the dressing rooms was filmed on a set. Right across from the dressing rooms, this is the area where Louis and Melanie are hanging out, waiting to do the money switch, and Max is just across the way keeping an eye on Louis and Melanie. After Melanie gets the bag, she heads out of the dressing room and down this aisle, and Louis quickly chases after her. In this closed off section of the parking lot, this is where Louis and Melanie park the van. This old auto garage can be seen a couple of times when they're getting in and out of the van. I believe this was the auto garage for Montgomery Ward's. I came over on the other side, hopefully I can explain it a little better. They would have been parked somewhere right here in front of me. Right over there, that's the Montgomery Ward's auto garage. And over here would have been the Montgomery Ward's building that you see them walking in front of, which is now the outdoor section of the mall. Another thing, if we turn the camera around, these buildings right here can also be seen a few times behind them. Okay, I'm going to give you one more perspective. Right over here, this is now the outdoor section of the mall. This would have been the Montgomery Ward. They would have been parked somewhere right over here. And then over here is the Montgomery Ward's auto garage. Back inside Macy's, we find the exit that Max Cherry uses when leaving the department store. After grabbing the bag from the dressing room, Max heads out these doors. Now pay attention when we go outside because the buildings right in front of me can definitely be seen when he leaves the department store. He comes outside and heads over to his car, which would have been parked right over here next to this lamppost, and that's how we can tell exactly where he would have been parked. He turns back and gives one more look to the Billingsley department store, and then gets in his car, backs out, and heads off down this ramp. After doing the exchange, Louis comes to pick up Ordell from Sam's Hofbräu. We see them getting in the van that would have been parked right down there in between these two buildings. I'm going to assume at the time there was no wall here. They then come through the parking lot, come out this driveway, and then make a right turn onto Olympic Boulevard. We very briefly see them passing through the intersection of 7th Street and Town. Now this one's pretty hard to recognize, but this is the location where Ordell has Louis pull the van over before he eventually ends up shooting and killing Louis. Now pretty much nothing on this street is the same. All the buildings have been torn down and rebuilt except for this building right here. I think this is the only building on this street that's still the same as it was at the time of filming. However, when they first pull the van over, you can see City Hall right over here, and you can also see this building way off in the distance. After killing Louis, Ordell gets out of the van and then casually heads off down the street that way. After Max tracks him down, he heads to this house where Ordell's hiding out. After they convince Ordell to head to Cherry Bail Bonds to meet up with Jackie, we see Max and Ordell heading out the front door and through this front yard. And then right down here is where Max's car would have been parked, where they get in and drive off. When Ordell and Max are heading back to Cherry Bail Bonds to meet up with Jackie, we see them pass right by this mobile home park. You can no longer see the sign for the mobile home park, but we do see them pass right by this sign in the center aisle. And if I walk out here onto the center aisle, you can now see the sign for the mobile home park. That's the exact same sign that we see them pass by. They would have been driving down the street right here, passed by the mobile home park. There's no longer a break in the center aisle, but they would have made a U-turn around the center aisle and then pulled up in front of Cherry Bail Bonds, roughly right about here. All right, so that's it. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so now. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
I didn't hear you wash your hands.